back to my channel. I feel like this is like a really good music to have on in the background. It's actually a I feel loved and safe playlist. Not left playlist, it's like a I've just had a nap. It's like a 9-hour like sleep healing frequency, 528 I would recommend. I think it's a 528 hertz or something, yeah. Just something that I've like found helpful in the last couple of nights just to chill out and whatever. I want to talk about something that is actually very dear to my heart, and with, again, I always usually disclaim this at the beginning, I don't know whether it'll end up on the internet or whether it'll be for me, but I want to talk about dealing with a friend or family member or someone in your life that is dealing with mental illness or narcissistic or personality disorder, to be fair. Like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and the effects that can really affect you on a very real and kind of tangible level, especially if you're dealing with a friend or family member who is, because I think, you know, I'm very much of the mindset that people can benefit from each other's differences. And I'm not saying like a personality disorder like makes someone more like lovable or something, but I also think wounded people create more wounded people, and not only do more wounded people create more wounded people, but people that are too comfortable or used to patterns of abuse either within their own lives. I'm gonna burn some sage because it clears my negative energy. So that's like therapeutic. I'm gonna just like show them lighting that. I think it's just like, let's burn some sage as well, like chill. And I definitely believe like energy picking and stuff on YouTube videos. Maybe that'll like come through in this video, so I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, like I definitely feel like people, I don't want to say again benefit off people each other's mental health and personality, not at all, because I think it can be extremely incapacitating, not only for the person dealing with it. Like I just want to talk about it because it's something where, as I've mentioned in the past, I've had my own mental health problems, right? But what I'm really talking about right now is especially things like when children are put in a family system with people with mental illness that is untreated and things like that, because, you know, it can be a real like harm to a child especially, and you can have you know, it can be a disposition within the family. And, you know, I definitely think it was the case for me. I feel that, you know, without getting too personal on my personal circumstances, but, you know, I definitely feel like I've dealt with people with mental illness and not been kind of validated for it, because I'm not being funny, when you're dealing with someone with mental illness, it's a massive deal, and you almost act as a bit of a carer often. Like, I feel like it really just depends on the capacity, but I feel like you know, just for context of this film, I was this video, I feel like I was born into mental illness running my family genetically, and it was never treated in certain members that it should have done, and for that reason I kind of was exposed to looking back, and even from a I know like health system, the public health system and social services and stuff, it works very differently than maybe it did 50, 100, 200 years ago, blah blah. But I also think there are some serious situations where people and children especially are exposed to a lot of abuse, and it can be often, I've spoken before about in my finances video that only briefly I said this, but I definitely think people and families with money, I think anything can really cover up abuse, but I definitely think families with money are a massive scapegoat for abuse and neglect often, because from the outsider's perspective they look like your, you know, white picket fence family and everything's cool and sweet and, you know, everything, you know, money, you know, they've got money, so it kind of compensates. And to a level, I feel like money does compensate for people's struggle. But when it comes to things like, as I said, mental illness and personality disorders and blah blah blah, it's really not something that anything can compensate for, and it really leaves lasting damage in varying degrees on different people. It can cause addictions, it can cause mental illness itself. And this is why, you know, I might really be tempted to post this video, because if it reaches someone that needs it, you know, and whether that's just myself, because I'm not being funny, I do benefit off my videos. But, you know, like, I feel like if it does reach someone that needs it, I feel like it would be relevant. But whether it does or whether it doesn't, I don't know. So I'll make that choice. But so I'm always aware not to kind of say things that don't make sense, not make sense, but aren't sort of like properly worth saying on the channel, especially when it comes to, I don't know, I try and build confidence on more heavier topics at the moment, let's put it that way, because I've filmed videos before and I look back at them and I think, I don't know whether it's worth posting that, because it is kind of tongue-in-cheek, and there's a reason when things are tongue-in-cheek that, you know, you don't always want to post them, because it is kind of heavy, and if you're having a normal day and it doesn't apply to you and you think, oh, that's a lot, you know, she's talking about her childhood sexual abuse and, you know, do I want to see that and blah blah. So I don't know, it's whether I feel called to post it, because at the end of the day I have been blessed to have like even a small platform that I have, and I don't want to just like abuse it with kind of, you know, overly heavy topics and topics where it's like a massive therapy session for me. So I like, that's not what I want to do. But anyway, I think it is a big thing. I don't know how much or little it's spoken about online, and I'm not sure how many people have videos on it and stuff. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't really want to watch a video on someone talking about their sad little mental illness family, because I'm just like, oh, whatever, I've got my own problems. So, but yeah, it does have a real struggle and a real impact on people, especially when it comes to things that like are like manageable to a level. People, and in addictions, actually, I haven't really thought about addictions. Addictions, really anything negative that's going to affect a parent. Addictions is a massive thing though, alcoholism and things like that, you know, and like people talk about being a functional alcoholic, and people talk about being an alcoholic that, you know, that isn't taken out of the home, and, you know, or drug addicts and things like that. I'm not being funny, I definitely believe that, like, on the real, like, I've seen parents that are extremely functional and healthy and happy, and they still, they do drugs, and it's not like a big deal, and it's not like anything happens in the family, because, you know, there's nothing wrong. And I definitely believe parents have their children removed from them unjustly, especially in situations that are really challenging when it comes to things like abuse in the home, physically or emotionally or sexually, or some. Sexually is different. I feel like if you're sexually abused in the home, that is like a reason to remove children. But when it comes to physical altercations, which I'm not being funny, depending on your predisposition to violence and things like that, I feel like comes to a point where you literally can't choose your struggle, right? And you can't choose necessarily your life circumstances. And I don't think you can. I don't think you choose a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, the ways that, you know, like, I want to kind of like level it out really, because I think it really depends, because, you know, like, I started this video talking about the impact on children, right? And that is kind of the reason that things like social services are involved sometimes, for the quote-unquote best interest of the child. But also, yeah, so I don't want to talk about really specific circumstances, because A, it's not my place, and B, it's really not something that I know a whole lot about. You know, do I see that people, you know, have, you know, bad, you know, so whatever. So there's really a spectrum, and then when it comes to things like autism as well, like either untreated or uncared for autism, or, you know, it depends, because I feel like people can be on a spectrum of autism as well, and things like that, where like they might not necessarily need or even benefit from like a medical diagnosis, but they have autistic traits. But at the same time, it's probably still worth considering the effect on a child, you know, because whether something is diagnosed or whether it's undiagnosed, you know, if something is prevalent, be that, as I've mentioned, short fuses and physical and sort of predisposition to physical altercations, which, you know, maybe towards someone else in the home or whatever, you know, from a lawful perspective, you don't want to ever like lay your hands on a child, and I do kind of like stand by that. But at the same time, you know, people have short tempers, and whether it's with a child or whether it's with a family member or another or a partner or something, you know, small things, you know, I'm not being funny. 50 years ago, it was normal to rape your wife, and no one really batted an eyelid about it. So whether there was some justice done there, no, it wasn't, because it wasn't even illegal. So having said that, like, I'm not saying like rape is ever okay either, to be fair, but obviously, yeah, so you've got the spectrums of autism and ADHD and psychological sort of like learning disabilities and things like that, which again may not be necessarily damaging. I feel like this is why social services is there. It gives me a bit of comfort, because I feel like this is why social services is there. I feel like it's just about being because like the thing about things like social services is they've got a really bad rep for just like taking children of people, and whether that's like always the case, I can't know for sure, you know. But I feel like when people do have like as I said, learning disabilities, a predisposition to physical violence, which I'm not being funny, can come hand in hand with any of the above, to be fair, addictions and autism and things like that, and just having sort of the nature of a short-tempered person or whatever, like, you know, it really, you can't control the sort of the like struggle you deal with, as I said. And I'm not being funny, if you're a short-tempered person, you're a short-tempered person. There's nothing you can do about it. I definitely feel like my autism myself, I have like a disposition to anger, to be fair. And I feel like we live in a very understanding world these days, in terms of like societally, and, you know, I've dealt with mental health, and I wouldn't say I'm open about it, but when it comes up, I sort of either have to be, because, you know, it's something that I don't say I have to be in many situations, to be fair. If ever I say it, it's usually online, or it's usually relevant to me. I don't feel the need that I have to share it. But that being said, like, you know, I want to talk about, because from my own perspective, I feel like there can be untold damage, right, on children. Because of my own experience, I'm talking from here, and I'm not talking about other people's experiences, because I don't know. I just want to quickly list the things, as I said. It could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, things like that, or, you know, because I'm not being funny, a lot of these things are like interlinked, right? And I definitely think like autism, right, can be very much linked to mental health problems or physical violence, because of, you know, when autism, you've got the spectrum of autism, which, you know, you may or be low, someone might be low or high on, where they do have dispositions to aggression, which leads to physical violence. Or there might be, you know, mental health problems because of the mismanagement of the autistic symptoms, or, you know, personality disorders because of the sort of navigation of those symptoms. You know, they might have sort of like issues in social situations that cause them to feel rejected, and then they get borderline symptoms and things like that. So, you know, there's that, and that alone, you know, I hear this quote, cutting off someone's legs to stop them from walking, and that kind of concept really freaks me out, because I'm not being funny, coming from a home like this myself, and obviously I do feel like any family will have some disposition or another. You know, I do feel like you can have more and less healthy families, 100%, and I feel like when it falls below the line of healthy, that's when sometimes you get caught out and things like social services can get involved, but not always. I feel like things can be unjust in the world, I also believe, and I also believe, like in my circumstances, I'm sure that you know, I came from a household that was unstable in many ways, and nothing was ever done for me, and I'm sure throughout history the same thing has happened. So I feel like you're really just in a bad spot if you get caught out often when it comes to things like social services. these days, but obviously you have to commend them in some circumstances where they are removed from extremely abusive and neglectful households. But who am I to judge and really know all of the ins and outs of those situations and circumstances? So therefore, it's really not a place for me to, comment, because at the same time, I also believe that they may unjustly and unfairly, and do unjustly and unfairly, take children from households that potentially have the ability to heal and actually have very much untold benefits because of the personality type that the person may be, and judges and things have biases towards people who, it's just a whole shitty system, to be honest with you, because as well these things are generational trauma as well. So you get someone who potentially, and also I feel like eating disorders falls on this spectrum as well, because, and even things like anxiety, things that are like less harmful, especially because mental health really wasn't something that boomers did much about, and there was a hell of a lot of shame around. Even my own life, whether that's because I've been exposed to talking more about mental health, but I also think because the world has changed and people are more open about mental health, and they are more open about, symptomology of autism, blah blah, and they share that online, or they share that, whatever. But yeah, like, it's generational trauma, because you get an anxious or a narcissistic parent. I'm not being funny. Narcissism is a personality disorder, so I'm going to bring it up because I know it offends some people, and they're like, oh, narcissism and blah blah blah, and everyone's got their kind of like traits, and if you, whatever, people find the word narcissistic offensive. I feel like at the same time I have done a lot of videos on narcissism. People with borderline personality disorder and things like that, or a comorbidity between that, they might have some mental health problems and eating disorders and blah blah blah. A child could be exposed to that, develop their own mental disorders from dealing with that, PTSD or something, because someone with borderline personality disorder may be physically aggressive as well, because that's kind of part of the package of borderline personality disorder. And it's when these things aren't treated, okay, or addressed, and the impacts aren't addressed on a generation, that generational trauma can, and probably will, even on a subconscious level, shift to the next generation. And then, I haven't had a great deal of experience with like heavy addictions, apart from potentially some like alcoholism traits and stuff. But you do get families that are, dealing with alcoholism chronically, and the parent is always drunk, and they're always shouting, and they're always physically abusive, and they're always verbally abusive, and they're always kicking off, and they're always upsetting the family members, and they're always scapegoating, the partner or the child, and they're always, being narcissistic, and they never take accountability, and that's got a massive strain on a family dynamic and the children within the family in a whole other way, And often in narcissistic family dynamics, this is a massive one where I feel like I read this poster recently, if you teach a child, if you shame a child, it teaches them to be guilty, and that kind of a dynamic can have a real effect on a child, from a level of shame, because of not only the shame of coming from a family with those sort of issues, because to be fair, I say every family's got their struggle. I believe that is true, but at the same time, I do feel that like some people don't struggle with alcoholism. Some families don't struggle with, and I can't choose the cards people have dealt in this life, and this is my problem, because I think generationally, whether social services is just to take away children from their homes or not, you have to look at generational patterns and how obviously when you do look at certain households, though I believe every family has their struggle, even be that slightly overbearing parent, or a parent that's overly strict, or a bit neurotic or kind of, I don't know, but I do think you get healthier households than others to a level, but it's definitely not about perfectionistic attitudes, or poverty and things like that can also be something. These are all kind of like whatever, like risk factors or something. I'm sure it's like ACEs and stuff. I don't know if that's just a mental health term, but you know, things that this ramble is dragging out a bit, but anyway, I feel like I will post this because I feel like it is relevant to people and stuff. Even, I'm not being funny, cultural stuff and you know, nationalities and also what's the word, immigration and things like that, and sort of asylum seekers and things like that, and homelessness actually can be a massive factor. And also people, right, and this may be within a family. Well, it happened in the Kardashians, didn't it, where Caitlyn Jenner used to be Bruce Jenner before he transitioned into his like true self, or like his female self, and he was dealing with that and having to, you know, transition to the gender that he truly was. And that can happen with an adult or a child, and I don't know the effects and the impacts of that on children, again, because I don't want to talk out my arse and say things that don't matter, because I definitely think, this is why I say everyone has a relative struggle, and this is why, you know, because you get people, right, that may, again, it comes back to the money thing. What one person struggles with, another person doesn't, and that's just the cold hard facts. Okay, obviously things have impacts on children, but when you look at things like when a child comes from a family with money, you know, they may not come from a family, they may come from also a family with alcoholism, or with you know, predisposition to physical abuse or autism, untreated mental health problems and things like that. But when you get someone that comes from a house with potentially poverty, you know, you might not get the physical violence, but you might get other things. You know, it really just honestly 100% depends on the situation and that stuff that you're actually dealing with. That said, you do get lots of households that really don't have to deal with any or most of those things, but they might just be strict and kind of middle class and sort of boring. You know, there may be depression that runs in that family, or there may be just, I don't know, an eating disorder, or because this is the problem as well. You know, no one is exempt from the struggles of family dynamics, because I feel like just some families are better at what's the word, hiding problems, right? Okay, I'm not saying that everyone deals with issues on the same level as others, okay, but on a real level, I do think that in some ways, because even when it comes to people, and even children actually, with narcissistic traits and stuff, you know, that's hard. I've seen people deal with it. I've seen it throughout school and stuff. It's hard to see, you know, that it must be challenging for a child to deal with that, and to possibly deal with an adult with that, because I feel like there's like the golden child syndrome of like, you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, you're enmeshed with a parent, you don't feel that you can like separate from that parent or displease them because of some, you know, implication that you might feel like kind of like discharged from the family or something because you've done something to upset a parent, and they can be extremely temperamental and things like that. You know, it's hard work, it looks like to me, to be narcissistic as well. So, you know, whether that's something that can be like healed generationally or something like that, or whatever, I don't know. But at the same time, I feel like the thing about narcissistic people as well is that they often are very driven by self-image, and often are very good at hiding their problems, which is what I'm trying to say. And things like people on the narcissistic spectrum, especially when it's not diagnosed, especially when it's not kind of seen or heard, especially when they've got children that may be narcissistic, where really it's just the norm to them and they're just copying their parents, because of, you know, their own disposition to be narcissistic as well. It's really not something that's considered an issue. But at the same time, when it comes to the damage, not only to themselves, but to the effects on other people, and also the kind of contrast of seeing people you know, outside of that family dynamic, and really kind of, I want to say, scapegoating people, because of, you know, because again, it comes from things like institutionalizational trauma as well, because you get certain children that come from a background of alcoholic parents, or the foster care system is a massive one as well, a really massive one, which can be extremely impactful and detrimental to a child and their stability and their mental health and things like that. And you get another child that comes from a middle class family that, you know, really doesn't have issues with the foster care system and is more secure. And then you get institutional bullying, you get institutional, you know, and you can be bullied for any reason, but often children are so ignorant and above their own, and so, uneducated on other people. That's where bullying often occurs, where you get a child which really comes from a certain environment, has honestly, you know, but I do think the reason I started talking about institutional things is because at the same time, it's not for another child, especially at that time, it's almost a form of, you talk about parentification within a family dynamic, but it's also not a child in an institution's place to actually be there and to be impacted by a child that has those problems in the first place, and, you know, that does come from a foster care system or an alcoholic family or blah blah blah. But often that is the way it works, and often children are impacted by each other's family issues for the benefit or the detriment, to be fair, because I feel like I've bonded with people in the past in school and stuff that have had similar struggles to me, and it's given me a level of comfort and validation at a time that, you know, I needed it. But at the same time, I know that I've been overly reliant on friendship groups in the past because of the fact I wasn't getting that support from the places I needed it. And unfortunately, it is the case that some people do look outside their family dynamic for support and for validation and for parenting, to be honest with you. And it's really not place of another child or another person in childhood or adulthood to parent you. Like, that's not their job and that's not their responsibility. And you have to be able to do that for yourself. And if there are issues that come up that mean that is a struggle, like, I feel like they should be addressed, especially when it comes to things like, you know, because there is support that can come. I say support, again, it's a word that, again, freaks me out because I feel like there's something to be said for personal freedom. Having been in a mental health service in the past, there is things to be benefited from when you're not. And I'm not being funny, mental health services are hard to come by. Like, you have to really be kind of referred often. Like, even though they are there, when it comes to minor things, often you're not put on a service. You may just be kind of seen by your GP or referred to some sort of like external therapy or something that you can kind of interact with. I'm not being funny, not everyone is actually going to benefit from therapy or like needs it really or wants it. But yeah, being in a mental health service, you really see the impact of outside opinions, and also people that are kind of like rooting around your business to the place where it's like, you know, not going to be necessarily beneficial to everyone, and also possibly have its own detriment when you've got that sort of dynamic where you really just want to live your life in peace and freedom, and then you've got people that want to just like monitor you and check up on you. It can just be a lot of effort when, you know, you just want to live your life in the way that you want to live it, and, you know, you have to feel that you have to explain yourself to people and be understood to really feel validated and blah blah. But yeah, this is the realization of, this is the kind of actual impact of these sort of like generational issues and stuff. And again, I'm not saying like everyone deals with the same thing. It's not worth kind of, but that is another thing. When you are traumatized, right, by these sort of dynamics, you can very much project those issues onto other people, and not only assume that other people deal with the same problems, right, which may or may not get you into uncomfortable situations. Or you may be overly sensitized to aspects of people and life that may have serious triggers for you, for example, and either repeat patterns of generational trauma or create new patterns of generational trauma, which is often the case as well. Again, and I think there is a sense of cycle of life here, but it's just really shit. Like, I just want to talk I want to talk about it. It's really shit for the child and the parent that is dealing with these generational traumas. And what's even worse is the scapegoating. Like, there's really just like no, like I feel like I'm just going for a bit of a like issue at the moment that is making me feel a bit negative or something. Someone even commented on a video, and I actually removed it because I thought it was a bit patronising and it was just like bad vibes or something. But they were like, "Oh, keep going, it's good to see you happy," and I was just like, I'm not a depressive person. Like, I don't feel sad necessarily, you know. I like, just because I'm just very much aware of people that, like, I'm not saying like I didn't agree with what they were saying, or like I didn't kind of on some level sort of but like I also believe in people that cut your legs off so you can't walk, you know. And I'm not saying that that was a comment to really do that, but at the same time I feel like there can be a sense of patronisation and kind of condescendingness that really is not appreciated by me, especially when I deal with my own problems and I have a sense of pride that is beneficial to my functionality. And I feel like if I start to victimise myself, because I'm just a literal person, it's really just a way for me to not victimise myself and to feel overly victimised by my situation and stuff like that, because it's really not going to be beneficial to me. I don't want to like crawl into a hole where, you know, I start getting negative mental health because I feel like I'm like in a bad place or whatever, where really I'm actually just chugging along fine and I deal with things how I deal with things. So yeah, I feel like it's always beneficial for people to say that sort of stuff, and in hindsight probably was like a nice thing to hear. But yeah, I just don't want someone to come across it and like victimise me and then I feel victimised and whatever. I just felt it was an uncomfortable comment, and I feel like that's why I deleted it. So yeah, I don't know how much more I want to say on this video because it's already on 31 minutes, but yeah, it really just is pretty shit for a parent that has to deal with these generational patterns. It's pretty shit for a child and the impact of generational patterns. I haven't really spoken about specifically my situation and the impact of my situation on myself, because I suppose it's not really for the internet and it's not really a therapy session for me. But it can be really hard, especially when you're being a carer pretty much and you're also trying to deal with your own life and actually your own dispositions, to be honest, and you're trying to figure out your own personality and your own navigation, and you're dealing with someone potentially with a personality disorder or mental health problems that really are actually extremely damaging to you and to other people around them and to themselves, but they may be in a very self-destructive place, and that's really not for someone else to take on or manage. But often people have to, because they are like exposed to them in a living situation, or they are exposed to them in an abusive relationship. Because at the end of the day, whether you're parent-child or a partner or something, if you're around that sort of a dynamic, it is abusive to a level or another. I'm not saying both people can't have issues and there can be abuse to one another, which is also negative. But this is just the reality of the world we live in at the end of the day, and I genuinely don't think anyone is exempt from issues like this. Again, just to reiterate, alcoholism, physical abuse, learning disabilities, mental health problems, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, issues around personality and, you know, sort of like gender things. I don't know a great deal about that, to be fair. It's not something that I've necessarily dealt with as well, but you see that sort of thing. Sexuality, social stigma around sexuality, you know, asylum seekers, people that immigrate, people that are homeless or forced to be homeless. Because I definitely think, someone said something so silly to me the other day, and they said people that are homeless, it can be a choice, kind of almost alluding to the fact that, well, they've got parents, why don't they go stay with their parents? And it's like, that is a ridiculous thing for me to hear, and it actually makes me a bit annoyed because I've been in those sort of situations myself, where it's like people make the decision to say, you know, it's not a decision, sorry. I feel like life can bring you a situation where you are forced out of your home for a reason or another, and you can't pay a rent, and whatever the hell reason it is, a very, very logical and reason that you can't escape. You may be evicted, you may just not have a house because you can't find one or whatever, and people choose to be on the street over an abusive family dynamic with these sort of issues that I'm mentioning, because they want to protect themselves. We are, let's not forget as well, we are all actually wired to protect ourselves. On a logical level, you know, as much as people can be narcissistic and not notice or really recognise or kind of validate the patterns of things like narcissism within a family dynamic, for example, it doesn't mean the impact isn't there. It doesn't, everything comes out by the wayside in one way or another, whether it comes through you know, discriminatory patterns or extreme scapegoating. Actually is often a way that narcissistic personality disorder comes out. It's actually part of it, where you're dealing with something like narcissistic personality disorder. Extreme scapegoating of a certain person, probably that doesn't have narcissistic personality disorder, is actually a way that that dynamic is managed by that person, and that's an extremely damaging thing for that person. And it's not long-term functional, to be honest, for the person with narcissistic personality disorder, because if that person is able to get away, they will, because no one wants to be scapegoated and things like that. If they are scapegoated, you know, it can just generally be because they've been exposed to that behaviour for so long and they've been forced to be scapegoated for so long. But when that person gets away, that narcissist is going to be stuck with their own personality disorder again. You know what I mean? So it really is just a whole shitter, you know. And as I said, when you get people that, you know, with particular cultural conditioning issues and unhealthy sort of, because I feel like I've heard somewhere a statistic about even physical, I think COVID even affected certain cultures and people of certain nationalities over others more so. And so even when it comes to physical illness is another thing as well, and physical disabilities, I don't even consider that as well. But it is kind of nice to see that everyone has their relative struggle, as I've said. And poverty I didn't mention on my list, just to mention another thing that people deal with. But I think, yeah, when it comes to just like certain dynamics or whatever, things come out by the wayside in one way or another. You know, even things like class issues and not only class issues but money issues, be that from being on the spectrum of always running out of money and feeling very not able to have the money to actually function within life, right? And feeling very much kind of like hard done to by people that are born into money at that time, can be very, very, you know, frustrated by that, and you know use money as a reason to scapegoat someone with it, or to ignore their own issues. They may have narcissism or another personality disorder, which means that they can you know, be blind to the impact they may have, and really scapegoat a sense of people, a certain person, because they've got a certain privilege, which may actually be hiding a hell of a lot of other issues that they may not choose to, wish to, or see. And that, I saw that happen on an episode of Married at First Sight, actually. And there was this person I just have to mention because it's something that came up for me today, and I was shocked that everyone was okay with it. She came from a family that had money, and her dad had died, actually, you know, bless her, and she'd inherited this money, okay, and this other guy with a face you'd want to smack, to be honest, in my opinion. Whether the group just didn't say anything because it wasn't appropriate because he was being so arseholey about it is another issue, but you know, he really stepped out of line for me, because he was calling her, and he'd really upset her by calling her like spoilt or something, whether she was like a grown woman, to be fair, and she was scapegoated basically, and he was like and she was sat there like crying almost, and she was like, you know, it really upsets me because my dad gave me that money, he's died. And, you know, obviously you could tell in her character there was nothing kind of overly privileged or overly, you know, too much about her or anything like that. And that's usually not the way it works, in my opinion, especially when it comes to money. People that have a lot of money are often very humbleized because of, I'm not being funny, the other issues that can be hidden by things like money. So yeah, he was just like, oh, and he didn't apologise. He sat there and he was like, well, you know, I thought she was being spoiled. We've all got the right to our opinions. And it's like, can you have some compassion for the fact her father has died and you literally are sat there trying to fucking scapegoat her because she's got some money? Like, you know, yet clearly he came from a potentially socially unequipped or potentially a place of poverty and have some sort of issue around people with money, because I have noticed that among people that do struggle with money, they do hold these resentments for people that don't have the same issue around poverty. You know, I have seen it in small doses, so I don't know really the full extent of that necessarily. I do and I don't, but I also think again, we will have our relative struggle, and I feel like things like jealousy and resentment is a whole struggle in itself, to be honest with you. And often people have natural jealousy for other people that don't deal with their struggle, whatever that is. So literally I've spoke for 40 minutes. Again, I feel like I will post this because I think it is like a big issue within the world, which again I definitely believe that people should advocate for like circumstances. But I definitely think what fucks me off the most is that some people are scapegoated, you know. Often people that don't have a lot of money, that are more open about things, that may struggle with things like autism, which I'm not being funny, things like autism, you know, as much as they can be impactful on a person and on a family dynamic if mismanaged and there's mental health that stem from them, autism on its own, right, you know, separate from things like borderline personality disorder and any sort of physical abuse that comes, often is harmless, actually, especially when managed in the correct way. You know, I feel like things like alcoholism and addictions is slightly different only because it can be harmful. But I'm not being funny. You can get alcoholics and stuff and people that enjoy a drink, but they may be functional and they may be completely unharmful to a family dynamic, really, and actually not be much of a physical risk at all. And you may get people that, you know, just the way, what fucks me off as well about things like physical violence as well is that, yes, obviously it's toxic, right? And I'm not saying people that do get into physical altercations and things like that and stuff like that, because I've been in those sort of situations myself, should really be exposed to each other, you know, necessarily because it might be toxic on a level that is the most healthy or whatever. But at the same time, you know, it's not always the case, and people that do that often just express themselves through certain ways. I think people are more and less physically inclined to act out because of just the way their physiology kind of rules them. Some people are more cerebral and some people are more somatic. And I'm not being funny, especially when it comes to things like generational trauma. People that get into domestic abuse situations can sometimes come from families that have been quite repressed. So when they meet each other and they're both physically able to sort of have that sort of outlet with each other in a way they're able to repair the relationship from, sometimes that's where domestic abuse can come. But the word domestic abuse is a very like the stigmas around different words are extremely difficult as well, because I've literally made a video recently about the prison system and how the world is broken, broken world rambles, and then later when I thought about it, I still stand by what I said, but also I feel like there's a time and a place for these situations, and that's the world we live in. We don't live in a perfect world, you know. But yeah, the stigmas behind things like you know, domestic abuse and things like that can be extremely potent, and especially mental health and stuff. And I try and talk about the stigma of mental health a little bit, you know, not too much, because I feel like some people just don't want to know. I don't want to just force it down people's necks, but at the same time, you know, people hear certain words, even depression actually, and people think, oh god, they've got like leprosy, you know, don't touch me, you might hurt me, and you know, you might infect me with your depression. And it's like, you know, yes, maybe just don't kind of, you know, mangle up their lifestyle, that's kind of the point. But at the same time, don't scapegoat them into being this inferior being because you're too uncomfortable with your own self to really just look at life in an overly broad perspective, and you want to scapegoat someone because of one issue they may have confided in you about, you know. And I feel like the same goes for things like domestic abuse and kind of even things like drug abuse and stuff like that, and the whole range, as I've mentioned. So I feel like it's really a shitter. What I was saying was, for families that do get things like social services involved, and they do get into the place of, because I feel like, you know, really unfortunate situations can happen, avoidable situations can happen, that truly, if managed differently, or if circumstances were different, could be a very habitable situation for a child, for example. And unfortunately, because of, you know, the circumstances, one or another, can lead to, as I said, a child being removed from someone's care because of, you know, issues that that are in theory there, but then really when you look at it on the broader spectrum, I myself have seen many people that have dealt with, I wouldn't say dealt with drug addiction, have made the choice to, it's about choice as well. It's about people that make the choice to, and like, let's not be funny, people before lockdown and stuff, you know, you think about systems, and you think about schools, and you think about, you know, most people aren't going to be teachers' pet energy. Like, most people are going to be somewhat resentful on one level or another of the authoritarian aspect of school, and they want to, in some way or another, have an outlet for that, be that each other, be that something unhealthy, be that through academia, through artistic stuff or whatever, or self-expression in some way or another. And, you know, the same goes in every other aspect of life. And I think when you get yourself into these situations where you really are, to be honest, often scapegoated, and often things can be taken out of context. That's my issue as well, context. So I do like to believe that everything happens for a reason, but at the same time, that's not something I'm actually going to rely on here, because I feel like even that is to minimise a person's situation that is unjust to them. Because, as I said, I feel like there can be many situations, and to be fair, social services do say this. I've seen horror stories of people that lose their children. They have to pay £60,000 and fight for 5 years in court, which often people don't have the ability to do, to be fair, to gain them back. And they sometimes do and they sometimes don't, right? And people that, I'm not being funny, I've seen, you know, hurt themselves because of the fact their children are fully taken away from them, and that has a real impact on a person, you know? So, yeah, when it comes to, I just want to touch on the scapegoating of certain groups, you know, and yes, things like, but I'm not being funny, having a narcissistic parent in a family system where a child has has a sexual orientation that is not straight, basically, and they feel scapegoated and shamed throughout their entire life because of that, or they don't feel that they can express themselves because of that, in my opinion, is just as harmful as parents that have a disposition to physical harm, but maybe don't impact a child. So I'm not being funny. Most parents, you do get the odd one, right? You get the odd one that burns their child, and they, you know, they've got a real psychopathic way about them, and they feel that they want to harm a child. But often, right, from my experience, it's not the case. When it comes to physical stuff. And I'm not being funny, this kind of stuff was really sort of not actually seen or heard or talked about in times past. I don't know how the Universal worked that stuff out, whether there was any sort of authority or, you know, police or whatever that got involved in more Western society or whatever else that kind of prevented this stuff from going on. But I definitely believe there are people, which I have so much compassion for, that really are scapegoated within society because of, and even the prison system. I'm sorry, I've done a video about My Broken World where I literally spoke about the prison system, but, you know, cultural issues, for one, is a real issue for me within the prison system, and people getting put into prison because of really self-expression and cultural norms that other people compoundly as well, the compounding of people's issues with each other's culture, with someone's culture throughout their lives, maybe even in a family that comes from a very respectful, should I just say, religion or culture, you know, and the whole, and often they feel very, very, very scapegoated, but their culture tells them that they should just be passive, and that, you know, they should just respect their culture and just, you know, don't, whatever, you know, and it'll all be all right and blah blah. They do something to act out because something breaks. We've all got a breaking point, and that's just the honest truth. We've all got capacity, we've all got breaking point. And I'm not being funny. And Kim Kardashian, as I've mentioned in the past, has my Broken World video, no one will actually be able to reference that, but in my Broken World video, Kim Kardashian has jumped on the whole prison system issues, and she's gotten her law degree so she can help some of these people in certain life situations that do have cultural things. Because coming from a background where I've got grandparents that were immigrants, like, cultures work differently, your physiology is different, you know, and I'm not being funny, people like me as well come from places of different origin, and people often are, where they're not just one culture and they're not just one nationality, but they're many, and so regardless of where you go, you're not going to fit one certain criteria because you just have physiology of many places. You know, and that stuff, you know, where you're driven to your actions, and it's actually healthy, you know, from a level of karma and reactivity within oneself, drives you to do something minor potentially, and you end up with prison time because you are like a violent, but you know, and this is the world we live in, and this is how people are managed. But at the same time, given the circumstances of people, of the injustice that goes on in the world, and again, all the factors I've mentioned in the past, but also you can have many of these factors, but culturally, the disrespect and the stuff that goes under the radar, you know, of people not recognizing each other's struggle, or respecting each other's, or understanding actually each other's sort of lifestyles, their cultures, or their ways of life, or their predispositions, or their choices, or their physiology, or, you know, I believe in things like spiritual gifts as well, when people have spiritual gifts and those things aren't recognised in society. I'm not saying like everyone should just sit down and worship, but you get some cultures that really are quite in tune with people's spiritual gifts and sort of have, you know, a hierarchy for kind of, or just accustomed sometimes to actually, you know, acknowledge that, whereas you get other cultures that often don't do that, and that can be damaging as well. So it's just a real issue, you know. And as well, I haven't even spoken about misogyny and women that are sexualised and scapegoated chronically because another thing about things like sexualisation, especially in childhood, is you can get PTSD from that sexualisation, okay? And you can go through life with a hypersensitivity to sexualisation, and you can be very reactive to people, or you can fall into addictions, and you can fall into physical abuse, or you can fall into life circumstances because of those experiences that someone else would not have, and it's not recognised, and it's just like people don't see internal struggles of another person. It sounds kind of like, I don't want to be like, sound a bit like weird and like, oh, you don't know what another person's dealing with, but you don't know what another person's dealing with, you know. It's not for you to be their saviour or something, but I feel like the world in general at large really should adjust to the fact that, you know, people have relative struggle, and yes, and I'm not being funny, there is injustice in systems, you know, and I'm not saying like the world is necessarily going to change, but at the same time, and I hope it does though, because I'm not being funny, mental health has been revolutionised. The way people talk about mental health these days is so different from 2010, to be honest. And I feel like people, you know, we're in this astrological era, to be fair, of respecting each other. That's what Aquarius is about. And I think the world does have to catch up with itself a little bit in that sense, because, you know, people should not be lying to themselves about how not only people all deal with relative struggle in one way or another, but also that, you know, many people are not either acknowledged for the prejudices they experience, and and the outcomes of that. Because I'm not being funny, I'm a massive advocate of lying to yourself about a circumstance or a disposition you have in one way or another, or the treatment of another person to you, only results, like they say, forced peace only causes more harm, or something like that. What is it? You know, when you don't react in a way that is justified, it only creates more damage. And this is when I feel like things like reoffending in the police system comes about, because you know, someone is punished for something that really, in balance, does actually make some sense in the way they did react. And again, this is the society we live in. But again, I don't want to validate the fucking prison system and all their injustices for the sake of this video, because I believe it's wrong and the way it all works is wrong. Obviously, I like to think the universe or God has some sort of hand in the way that things work out, because I am not God. At the end of the day, I can't just sit here like whirling over things like the prison system necessarily, you know. But it is about people like myself. Whether it'll be myself, probably not, but I'm hoping, you know, there's other people in the world that can, like Kim Kardashian for example, that will help with putting legislation in place to protect these people. Because I'm not being funny, people of, and it's said, and people roll their eyes at it, I feel like sometimes, because you do get so much of it, but it is the fact that people of certain cultures and stuff like that, they are the vulnerable in society. People that are mothers are the vulnerable in society. People that are men are vulnerable in society. Everyone's vulnerable in society to one level or another. And that is the fact as well. So even when people are, you know, dealing with mental health, dealing with scapegoating, dealing with PTSD, dealing with, you know, generational trauma, we are all vulnerable to one level or another. But what really fucks me off is when you get some people that are so ingrained or actually drowning in their own. I even said today, so the boomer generation and the way that they were all beaten as children, that's a generational trauma, if you ask me. But I feel like people though that have had that sort of a situation happen are actually extremely detrimental to the scapegoating of other generations actually. And it probably was worse for millennials. I'm not being funny. Like, I am partially a millennial, but I'm partially a Gen Z, and I feel like I've gotten a little bit of a better end of the stick. I'm not being funny than certain, like, potential millennials and Gen Zennials and whatever that, you know, may have gotten even worse end of the stick. From the boomer generation that were beaten as children, let's not forget, and the silent generation were beaten as children. Luckily, that doesn't exist anymore. So silent generation, which were the boomers' parents, would have hit the boomer generation, and in their mind things like physical abuse is okay, and scapegoating a child. I'm not being funny, you get sociopaths everywhere. You know, there will be people that were drawn to the teaching, you know, you're always going to get your amount of people that are really bad eggs, people that, you know, probably do need to chill out in prison for a bit, people that are going to, you know, hurt children sexually, and they are but I'm not being funny, it's not really, you know, and things like that, and things that people really should be punished for, you know. But when it comes to, but I'm not being funny, even like the boomer generation, they're so, I'm not saying it's okay to touch children because of this, but I also feel like, you know, there is a lot of, you know, there's not sympathy for an old person that has dealt with generational trauma, that has no understanding of mental health, that has no understanding of autism or generational trauma at large, and they are just kind of left to fester in their own trauma, and then something ends up breaking in them. There's definitely something mentally wrong with people that do stuff like that. Like, that's not normal behaviour. You know, I don't really want to talk about that now because it's a very dark topic that really I can't fully relate to, if I'm honest. But I feel like when it comes to physical abuse and people breaking because of that sort of stuff, in some way or another, you know, people break, okay? And I'm not talking about touching children here, let's just completely like wipe that off there, because I don't really want to talk about that as much. I'm trying to include everyone in this. I feel like there is a level of, even I can't really fully empathise with that, and I feel like they should go to prison for that. And those circumstances will come because it's uncomfortable for me to talk about. I'm just not going to address it at this point. But yeah, scapegoating is bad and stuff like that, but we all have our own relative trauma, so I feel like people need to remember that. I have been talking for an hour. I'm aware that most people won't watch this entire video. I'm aware that I probably won't even watch this entire video back. But it is important to talk about these things, especially for someone like me that I feel like I see it. I want to talk about it because it's a big deal. People are far too comfortable at large, and obviously the general mainstream population is way too comfortable, even though mental health is more talked about, are way too comfortable putting their heads in their laptops and working their 9 to 5s, in my opinion. I'm not saying like everyone should, just because I don't think everyone is going to have a YouTube channel, and really, but I think everyone to one level or another should be aware and educated of other people's life circumstances, and really be able to get their heads out of their laptops and out of their money making whatever. We need those people, you know, we need those people to work and help run the society that we have. But, you know, I want to spread the awareness of people that have generational trauma, even in this, and they're not exempt from trauma either, to be fair. Just because they got a decent job does not make them a higher being than anyone else, you know, from any circumstance. And often they've got their own generational traumas themselves. But and even that's a level of scapegoating, to be fair, you know, scapegoating people in certain jobs and things like that. Not really, but yeah, I just feel like scapegoating in general is bad. We should all moderate our behaviour and realise that everyone has their own relative struggle, and really just like keep fighting for justice, really, and sort of like real kind of truth to come out eventually, and justice to come out where things, you know, can be possible. Because obviously, like, everything is what I feel like we need to end on like a good note here, but everything is possible. I feel like, you know, people recover from addictions, people recover from you know, physical abuse, people recover from mental health problems, people recover from PTSD, people recover from systems of you know, abuse, and people of abuse, and therapy is really helpful for people with mental health problems. There's medications available. There's, you know, I don't want to use the word support because I feel like support is like a big word, and often it's not actually very available, to be honest, for many people. You know, there are systems and things available for people to do what they want to do, because I've seen it myself. I had mental health problems, you know, wasn't really a thing for me, but when I was involved in a mental health service, that sort of support was beneficial to me when I was trying to do my higher education. You know, had that support not been there, had the medications I was put on not been there, I don't know if I would have been able to do my higher education at the time, because of my mental health being so bad. I don't need those now. But what I'm saying is that support at the time in that circumstance was beneficial to me. There are supports for people and therapies for people with addictions, with, you know, autism, with, I don't think you don't need necessarily support with, I say support, like, people don't always need support, especially things like autism, especially with low level autism. It's not usually something that's needed. Some people with, you know, so it really just is varying degrees, and it's just like, the answer is not just to scapegoat, is not to blame, is not to, and again, we don't live in a perfect world, and not everyone can have this like mindset all the time. I'm aware that people just get on with their own lives and often don't really think about other people, but I think having that sort of a little bit extra kind of compassion and understanding of other people, and really just like actually being able to have that strand of awareness and stuff like that for others can honestly change the world, to be honest. And yeah, there's yeah, I just feel like it's just really important to keep things in balance, and I honestly just have more motivation to continue with pursuing your goals, because, you know, no one is to say that you can't achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Often people have extremely limiting beliefs, especially that have been ingrained by people not only with their own generational trauma, but people that are not going in the same place as you, whether they've got generational trauma, whether they've got personality disorders, whether they've got mental health problems, whether they've got whatever biases and blah blah blah. Hugely impactful. But also just people that aren't going in the same direction as you, and people that really don't have the right or understanding to actually comment on your lifestyle or cross those boundaries in any way, and should not be influencing you in that sort of a negative way, because, to be honest with you, they are on a completely different level to you, and that's not something that, you know, is going to be beneficial to you. So they shouldn't be sort of impacting you in that negative way, and that is abuse. At the end of the day, it's emotional abuse. If someone is putting you down for the path you want to go on, it's emotional and psychological abuse to really kind of tear that down in some level or extent, and people should respect each other's boundaries and really get help for any sort of issues that they have, and really just know when to get that support and help, you know. So anyway, everything is possible. And also, like, life, last little thing for anyone who is here, which I feel like probably isn't many people, is that life happens, and bad stuff happens to good people, and no one really has the right to judge, really. And, you know, it doesn't mean that someone is a bad person because they do something bad, necessarily. We all have the right to redemption and restoration and forgiveness for ourselves and for each other. And, you know, I'm not being funny. In my experience, mental health, any sort of learning disability and blah blah, there's really not someone I've come across that is unable to be supported to a place of, you know, being able to be a supportive enough person in a family dynamic, or a person that is truly, you know, able to function as a person, whether that support is beneficial to them or recommended or not for various reasons. You know, there's always, you know, a place for people, and their desires are most usually achievable, to be honest with you. It sounds like a really cliche thing to say, like, just reach for your dreams or whatever, and like that you can achieve if you just believe, kind of thing. But it's not about believing necessarily as knowing that it is achievable, and people that tell you that it isn't really shouldn't be doing that, because they clearly have some issue with themselves. Healthy people don't drag other people down. That is just the truth. People that are healthy do not shit on other people. Like, that's not normal. So those people should not be there, you know. And just action to kind of separate yourself from that sort of interaction would be beneficial. Sleeps people clearly do have some problems, and this is the kind of mental health issues and borderline and personality problems which I started referring to in the beginning of the video. And I'm going to go because I feel like that literally is pretty much what I want to say. So thanks for listening, and everyone has a relative struggle for anyone who needs to hear it, because don't I know it, and it doesn't make me a bad person, it doesn't make you a bad person. There's always spectrum for healing and restoration and progression and achievement and fulfillment and justice and peace and contentment. You know, bad things do happen. You know, some much worse than others, but, you know, people can always find peace from situations, and it's so important to not allow these bad situations to take your peace or to take your will to achieve in the future. And it's difficult when, you know, you can't speak for other people's circumstances, you know, when it comes to things like deaths and stuff like that. It really is not something you get over. There is grief that really sits with you and is not removed, and it just sort of sits there, and it's what it is. It's always there. You know, the pain may lessen to a level, but often it still remains there. So yeah, you never know what someone else is dealing with, and yeah, just compassion is good. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'm tired myself out. Cheers, bye.